Hello, everyone. I think we are at the top of the hour, so I probably will not delay starting at this time because I think most people are already joining in, but I will just say welcome. Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time. I'm Laura, I'm the dietitian that works with Premier Weight Loss, and thanks for joining me this evening. Tonight, we are talking about the topic of nutrient-dense foods to help overcome appetite suppression. And if you've been to one of these webinars before, maybe there will be a few things that are familiar, but maybe it's going to be said in a different way or rephrased, or maybe this will all be brand new to you. And so I hope that you can enjoy and get something out of this. But if you do have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to hit that Q&A button at the bottom left hand of your screen. And if you wish to remain anonymous, by all means, you can opt for that. But if you do want me to mention your name, just so you're aware that I'm addressing your question, you can leave it that way. And there will be time at the end of this for questions as well. So let's get started. Well, the mantra that I do every single time is remember the quality of your calories matters. And that's essentially why you're joining me here today. This topic perfectly aligns with this mantra because we all know that when our appetites are decreased, then we need to get the most value or bang for our buck with whatever calories that we do take in. So what are we going to cover today? Well, first we'll talk about what we actually mean by the term nutrient dense, if you've not heard of it before, or if it just has been a word or phrase that you've heard in passing, but not really had a chance to take in and think about what that term means in day-to-day. Also, we will do a brief comparison to help visualize nutrient dense versus energy dense. There's a bit of a difference. And some examples of some top nutrient dense foods. Also, there's a few tips for when you're not hungry, and also maybe ways to maximize the amount of nutrient density for a small intake. And at the very end, a quick little review of some signs that you may be getting some gaps in your nutrition somewhere, and when it might be an appropriate time to talk to your provider, someone at the Premier office. And of course, at the very end, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand at the end of this. So let's define nutrient density. Depending on what information you visit from good quality sources, this definition will vary a little bit, but one that I thought was very simple and to the point was by the American Heart Association, where essentially it's the amount of nutrients you get for the calories consumed, or like I said earlier, more bang for your buck. If you're getting more vitamins and more minerals out of a smaller amount of calories, then you're going to consider that a nutrient dense food. Oftentimes people think immediately like broccoli or those leafy green vegetables, which do count, absolutely. And so that's essentially what we mean that. And again, the reason why nutrient dense is so important, even though I said the mantra, is there was a review of 10 studies, people who were on GLP-1 medications or weight loss related medications. And in those 10 studies, on average, they were seeing that calorie intake from, say, baseline for people was down by anywhere from 16 to 39%, which can be a huge drop in what you might originally have been eating. So if you were originally eating 2,000 calories a day, now you're down to about 1,220 or 1,680 at the most. Some of you may be eating less than that. And eating fewer than 1,200 calories a day truly can make meeting your nutritional needs difficult if you're going through food alone. So it's important to be aware of that. And that's, again, why we're looking for nutrient density, because if we're going to make those calories count, it's going to be counting out, adding up a lot more quickly when you've got fewer calories to work with. Like I said earlier, nutrient dense and calorie dense, they are different. So calorie or energy density, you may heard it referred to different ways. That essentially is thought to be more calories with minimal nutritional value, or some people may describe it as empty calories, or the classic phrase, although I don't like to use it, junk food, right? So as an example, you can see this difference from this photo here to the left on pizza, which we would consider to be pretty calorie dense. One slice can be up to 315 calories. Compare that to about 315 calories of veggies and protein and all of this really good micro and macronutrients on the right here. So where are you getting the most nutritional value? Where are you getting the most benefits? On the right, of course. And you're getting that in 315 calories. For many people, they're also getting full pretty quickly off of that. But at least, even if you can only eat a quarter of this plate, you're still going to be getting in more overall beneficial nutrients than you would if you were eating the whole slice of pizza here. There sometimes is a question though, can foods be both? And absolutely they can. And that doesn't mean you should avoid them, but you do need to be aware and potentially limit them depending on where you are in your weight loss journey. So avocado, for example, is a really good one because it's been very popular in recent years, but it is high in healthy fats, but that, considering that it is the most calories per gram at 9 calories per gram, you're going to be seeing that an avocado will have a lot more calories to it. The same goes for nuts and seeds, and then dairy, especially if it's full fat types of dairy, as well as fatty fish. I would never be someone to say that you shouldn't have any of these, of course, because they can all be very beneficial, but they do have a little more calories as well. So it's to be aware of that. So very briefly, I wanted to list out what some top nutrient-dense foods would be, or what you might want to have in your day-to-day menu and meal plan. Again, this doesn't mean you have to have a whole one or a certain amount, but if you know that you're getting in a variety of these foods every day, if you're getting these more often than you are getting, say, the pizza alternative, then you know that you're moving in the right direction toward having a healthier overall diet. So I gave some protein examples, both animal and plant-based: tofu, cottage cheese. Lentils, by the way, they typically will cook faster than other types of dried beans. So I think if you're in a rush or if you want something a little more simple, but you love to have beans for their fiber and protein content, a lentil is a good option. Here I listed the healthy fats and also small amounts of the avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds. Those can help boost calories if needed as well. So there may be some people who feel like I'm not actually getting enough calories right now. And that's a time when healthy fats can actually be very helpful. Also, fats can help you absorb certain nutrients such as vitamins A, D, E, and K. So getting in healthy fats to not only help with maybe some good calories, but also helping absorb those vitamins can be very beneficial. I've also listed a few fiber-rich foods here. Berries, of course, one of the highest fiber fruits out there. Then some grains, some non-starchy vegetables that get those legumes there. And finally, I listed at the end, the term a lot of people like to use is superfoods, although I feel like that's more of a buzzword than anything really accurate, but full of micronutrients would be another way we could look at this. And these are pretty intuitive, but your dark leafy greens and cruciferous veggies, as well as bright whole fruits. And I do like to lean toward whole fruits versus glasses of juice, just because when you're drinking fruit juice, you're generally getting extra calories, but not as much of the benefits like the fiber that you would be getting from eating a whole fruit. Also, let's talk about some tips to get in those nutrient-dense foods. So I give you this long list of protein and fiber and all of that, but how do we put this into practice? And so I wanted to give you a few examples. So the first one I wrote here to think about batch cooking, which is basically if you have meal plans or menu plans ahead of time and you're able to do some pre-preparing, then you can have that frozen and ready to go. And also, when you don't have to decide last minute on a food or a meal to have, that would be a good way to approach that because you already know what's coming. You don't have to make a decision that maybe you're not in a position to make a healthy decision, like many of us, if we are feeling hungry. And also, if you have things pre-prepared, you don't have to eat all of it at once. You can eat a small amount of it. Just like I was saying, if you've got a quarter of that nutrient-dense plate, you're still doing better than if you had that calorie-dense pizza. Now, with this in the parentheticals here, the Mayo Clinic menu example, I wanted to share an example of a meal plan that actually the Mayo Clinic had put together for people on GLP-1s, and it goes through an entire week's worth of meals, and they also give some tips for preparation. I do believe if you ever are interested in, you can probably sign up. I'm happy to do the investigation if you are interested in that. You can usually work through them to get these meal plans generated for you. I also have a couple programs that can help generate meal plans. Let's see what the example looks like. See if I can share this early here. Okay, it should be showing up for you. So this was the week, but you can start from the top here. So the Mayo Clinic talks about a protein balance for GLP-1's meal plan, right? And as we go down, they give a few tips, just like I'm giving you tips, talking about small frequent meals. Don't worry about perfection, which was another topic that I covered once here. Also easy to consume, easy to prepare foods. And here was the batch cooking that I was talking about, making some freezable meals, having some small size containers so that way the portions might not seem so overwhelming. They also talk about snacks here, and I'll show you why if I can scroll down. So here's where they talk about their meal plan, and you can see that they show leftovers, so you can make a bunch of food in advance, and then you have leftovers with protein focused, and then also some lunches and dinner ideas. They talk about smoothies at the end because it can be easier to drink your calories sometimes. Examples of healthy options here. I just thought this was a fantastic example that was readily available online, and so I wanted to make sure to show that to everybody here. Also, don't fear, they do talk about some swapping meals. They give out grocery lists and also the recipes. So just because you see this meal plan doesn't mean that you now have to figure out what the recipe for that is. And so I know that they offer that if that's something, this style looks appealing. And then I do have a couple programs that can help create menus as well. It's always about finding what works for you. All right, moving back to the PowerPoint here. Looks like it's showing back up. Okay, so then I also talk about focusing on balanced snack size meals, if you will. Essentially, if you know that you are combining fiber-rich carbohydrates and a protein and a fat, or maybe two of those three together for a snack, even if the portion isn't large, you're going to be, again, choosing some very nutrient-dense options. So I gave some examples such as raw vegetables and hummus or salsa, or black bean dip, whichever one sounds best to you. And quite frankly, if raw vegetables and a little bit of ranch dip is the only way that you're going to be able to get in some vegetables, I think we can allow that. Also, fresh fruit plus a nut butter of your choice, and then maybe sprinkled with some sunflower or pumpkin seeds. It's another really good snack that you know is going to be full of fiber, full of nutrients, and not too many quote unquote empty calories. And finally, for, I know this is a little bit on the end of the trend, but if you liked avocado toast, well, you're in for good news because that was a pretty healthy option. So think of making avocado toast with whole wheat bread and then a hard-boiled egg even to maximize the protein. It can just be one slice. It could even be a thin slice. But again, we know that's going to be more valuable. But again, sometimes it's just easier if you can drink those calories because you don't want to think about it, you're busy. Maybe there's just none of that appeals to you, and that's okay. Doing a liquid type of nutrition is certainly reasonable and valid, whether it be in meal replacement drinks that are already made or high protein smoothies. And I want to emphasize high protein smoothies because many smoothies that you might get at, say, I don't want to call it a restaurant, but at a store that would make smoothies, they tend to be mostly fruit with very minimal protein or maybe a lot of sugar, again, with minimal protein or fiber. They do have options. Most of the ones that I've looked at, you can look for ways to adjust that. But I wanted to also share with you sort of a formula to create a high protein smoothie or what to look for, say, if you're at a store that makes smoothies and you want to sort of see what that formula looks like. So here's a good example for making your own smoothie. So best formula is to make sure that you're based in protein first and foremost. So whey protein is usually a good choice for many people if you're not vegan because it tends to be quickly digested. And also if you're doing this for after a workout, it can be digested, absorbed, and pretty well used. But plant-based proteins are fine. So pea, hemp, or soy proteins can be helpful. Ideally, if your smoothie can be containing 20 or 30 grams of protein, that would be great because then you know you're going to be using that protein value. I did want to list quickly to deviate for protein. You can also include some whole food options, maybe as a supplement to the protein powder, or maybe it's just a smaller smoothie and you aren't able to, or you don't want to get in that 20 to 30 grams. I wanted to give some examples there of some tofu, which has 8 grams of protein thereabouts in 6 ounces, as well as some hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds. Just be aware that this can change the texture, so you'll want to find a texture that suits you. The next item is, of course, adding liquid, and as you can see here, I'm listing a juice as the smoothie liquid, because really, that's not where we want to get our liquid. Water wouldn't appeal to me, but for some people it does. But a dairy milk, almond milk, soy milk also is perfectly reasonable. But having some liquid there where, again, you're going to get in maybe some protein, but also not a bunch of fruit sugar. The fruit comes later. So this is where we talk about nutrient-dense add-ins here. So leafy greens, just so you're aware, spinach is probably the least offensive in flavor if we're going for that, because other types of vegetables might carry a flavor that doesn't come across well, but it can make the smoothies look very, very dark. And if you don't like the way green looks, make sure you've got it in an opaque container so you don't have to be faced with that. That's something that I would need. So I wanted to make sure I brought that up. And then for fruits, I think berries, of course, are going to give you a lot of antioxidants, a lot of fiber. I would also suggest, though, something like pineapple, maybe apples, because having a bright flavor in there can help with the overall flavor. And then finally, some optional add-ins if you want to have maybe a little bit of variety or if you want some fats. So I wanted to include this so you can see what the general formula is looking like. Now let's talk about nutrient gaps. Say you feel like you're following all this, or you know your appetite is still decreased. Is something missing? And it can be hard to determine for sure, but I wanted to list out some possible signs of nutritional, I don't want to say deficiency necessarily, but gaps. So I list out here fatigue and dizziness. Hair loss is a possibility, as well as constipation, and then even skin changes. And you can see here that frequently when there's a nutrient gap, it has a lot to do with protein and fluids mostly. Also fiber when constipation is involved. So it's a lot of back to the basics. We're not trying to figure out if you've met the exact amount of your vitamin C for the day. We're really concerned about sort of the macronutrients, if you will, in general. However, supplementation of specific nutrients may need to be considered, and that's time to definitely ask your provider, because there are blood tests that can be done to look for nutrient deficiencies, and some nutrients of concern are ones that tend to be nutrients where people oftentimes will show up being deficient in or getting less intake of, were the following: calcium and iron, as well as zinc or folate, thiamine, and the vitamins A, E, C, D, as well as B12. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily deficient in all of them by any means, but maybe there's one that you feel might be a bit low on. So I wanted to make sure they included that. And so for some people, a provider-approved multivitamin might be all you need to do, but maybe there's something that they want to focus more in on. So I wanted to make sure I gave that to you. So putting it together, aiming for nutrient-dense foods, because that's going to make your calories count more. And that's going to be, again, giving you the most bang for your buck. Also, limit the energy-dense foods if they aren't also nutrient-dense. Again, we can go back to that photo of that pizza and then that sort of grain veggie bowl. If your appetite isn't big, snacking throughout the day is fine. If you have one meal that you made, but you eat it in 3 passes through the kitchen versus at one time, that's okay. You don't have to eat everything all at once. And of course, drinkable options, meal replacements, or smoothies are perfectly valid to use as well. And of course, do keep your eyes open for any signs that you aren't meeting your needs. It's always better to prevent than to treat, but keeping an eye open is always helpful to make sure that we can overcome that earlier rather than later. And so with that being wrapped up, I wanted to make sure to offer you some time for any questions or any comments, or I also love it if people have any contributions. So if you have tried something that is more nutrient dense, or if you found a way to get in more nutrient density throughout the day, if snacking works for you, or if liquid nutrition works, would love to hear it, because I think when we can all work together and put out those ideas, it's wonderful to hear, because just because I think of it doesn't mean I've thought of all of it. And so I love to hear what other people's experiences have been. Again, you can always opt for the anonymous option, but you can also leave your name if you have questions. And if you wish to not ask me here, or if you think of your question 10 minutes later, by all means, reach out to Premier Weight Loss. The staff can get in touch with me and be happy to forward your question along. Or I know that they are all very smart and very passionate about their jobs, so I'm sure they might have answers for you as well. Okay. Well, I think that concludes our evening, but I do appreciate everyone joining this evening. And I hope, I know it's raining where I am, so I hope that everyone stays dry. I hope that you found this helpful and informative. And of course, if you do have questions that come up later, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Premier Weight Loss team. They will get in touch with me and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of the evening. Bye. And if anything comes up, I'll respond.